process. Right, because you never know. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here at Crossroads Luncheon. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and I'm so pleased to have you here on a Friday of the first week of session. It was actually a relatively slow week.
Was it?
Well, it was for me, so yeah. We'll get into that.
Oh, yeah.
But as you know, Interfaith Alliance of Iowa and Action Fund, we are at the State House nearly every day of the legislative session. These beautiful people are there pretty much every day. And yeah. And we work on a broad spectrum of issues, mainly in civil rights, public education, and a variety of other issues. And it is a delight to have good friends up there who are doing the work both in terms of lobbying and advocating, but also representing us, representing Iowans across the state. And so I'm thankful to all of you for being here, including those who are online. We are a packed crowd today, and I'm glad you could be here. And I'm sure we will be packed online as well. I know we have a number of folks who this is your first time for being here, so I will introduce our speakers. They'll talk for a bit, and then we do questions and answers. I bring the microphone around to you when you raise your hand, so you can be thinking about your questions as our folks speak. This is, at its very essence, Crossroads is about civility and how do we have difficult conversations and important conversations on issues that matter to each of us in our communities. So I'm grateful, as I said, for you to be here. And so I have the delightful task of introducing Representative Jennifer Konfrst, who is the leader of the Democratic Caucus in the House. She serves in Polk County in the Windsor Heights area and has served as leader for a couple years now. So
4 years.
4 years. And then newly elected Democratic leader for in the Senate, Senator Janice Weiner, who serves in Johnson County in the Iowa City area. And so we have 4 years of experience and brand new, but not brand new to government by any means. And so delighted to have both of them here they're going to talk a little bit about legislation, a little bit about what's happening at the State House, and then we'll get to your questions. So thank you so much to both of you for being here.
Thank you. Hello. Well, I am thrilled to be here. I see so many friends. I see so many constituents, coworkers, friends. This is one of my favorite events every year because if you're going to yell at me, I know it's coming from a place of love. And so a little traumatic, so we're fine. But this is Plymouth Church where I was confirmed and got married, and my babies got baptized and confirmed here. So this is home for me, and I'm thrilled to be here. So let me just start off by saying that if you're wondering what happened in the election, we are too. We're doing research right now. We're looking into it. I can tell you that legislative seats actually overperformed the top of the ticket by quite a bit across the state. And so just know this, there is hope, and we are working to figure out how to proceed, but there is no doubt we will do so and come back. So just know that as we're thinking, okay? So that is a question that's hanging over everybody's head, and I just thought I'd throw it out there. So the legislative session started 8 weeks ago. No, that's not true. It started 5 days ago. But it feels very, very, very long. So every legislative day is 3 days in my mind. So the morning is a day, the afternoon is a day, and the night is a day. And so we're way into this now. But, we as a House caucus have worked hard to put our agenda forward, and we're working on that right now for this session. We didn't do all this work to go up and vote no. And so we kind of have three approaches to legislation. One is introduce our own that reflects what Iowans want, and then make Republicans not take it up and try to hold them accountable. Two, try to find ways to work behind the scenes to get things done. I like to say I've passed 6 bills, not one with my name on it, because you got to work to get it done rather than care about the credit. And finally, our job is to also hold the majority accountable. That's the job of the minority. And when they get off track with what Iowans are asking for, it's our job to point it out. So that is our threefold approach to governing. Nowhere in there is crying. And so we're trying our best, friends, but no. We have a caucus that has amazing legislators in it, and they are already working hard on introducing bills, on negotiating behind the scenes. We are a little behind this year in the sense that normally the governor sort of previews what she wants before the condition of the state, and then Republican leaders do that. This year, they didn't know a lot of that she was going to say, and so we had to wait till Tuesday night to find out what they were going to care about. We heard a lot pre-session about property taxes, education. We're just trying to figure out exactly what they're trying to do. So as we look, we've been doing a ton of meetings before session, and a lot of them have revolved around the property tax space. I represent 3 communities, Windsor Heights, Clive, and West Des Moines. One is stagnant, 2 are growing, and the stagnant is not a bad thing. It's just that we've stayed the same size for years, which has actually been helpful because you can compare apples to apples when you have a population that stayed about the same size. As you might imagine, they have some thoughts about the property tax proposals that are going to come forward and what impact it's going to have on local cities. One thing that we've heard a lot from the Republicans is we want to get in there and look at local communities' budgets, and we want to see where there's access. I will tell you that some of the challenge is that when you have growing or stable communities, a lot of those are represented by members of the minority party, and therefore they are not a priority. I will tell you that there's a legislator who I said, we have to be careful because we don't want to discourage growth. And he said, my community hasn't built a house in 5 years, so growth isn't my priority. And so we're just working to educate and to spread the word as much as we can. And we're putting forward, we will continue to defend public education until we're blue in the face and make sure that it is funded appropriately, of course. We're going to look out for and be on the lookout. You need to know that private, and you probably do because this is you, private school vouchers are the fastest growing part of Iowa's budget. The fastest growing, and there is no cap on it. There is no limit to how many vouchers they can put out there. Many schools, of course, have increased tuition by the amount of the voucher. And the governor's ask for this year's appropriations for private schools is, I believe, 40% over last year. So if you're wondering where where we could find some room, it's in the private school vouchers, unaccountable private school vouchers that are going to the richest families in the state. There is no income limit either. So I had an opportunity to speak in Winthrop, Iowa. Winthrop, and you've all been there. And in that speech, I said, this means that the richest family in Des Moines, because they don't like us, the richest family in Des Moines can sit down at the table and say, can we afford to send our 4 kids to Des Moines Christian? And they will agree that yes. And Kim Reynolds comes along and says the people of Winthrop will pay instead. You go ahead on vacation. And that is something that in these small communities, they are furious about. Knoxville is furious because the money's coming out of the public schools and going to Pella Christian, right? There is anger out there about these school vouchers. We just have to capture it, right? And we have to show the impact. Reproductive freedom is, of course, very important to us as well. We're not giving up, and we know that a tax on birth control could be next. And so we are keeping our eyes out for that as well and finding ways to point out the devastating impacts of the ban. And of course, hope for no devastating impacts, know they're coming. So we need stories. So if you know people who are having the devastating things happen to them that you've heard of other states, they're going to happen here. And so we just need to know that and provide support and also use that as an example to demonstrate why this is going too far. But our laser focus this session really is on lowering costs for Iowa families. And our concern continues to be, the governor mentioned another corporate tax cut in her speech. Corporations probably are good on taxes for a while. And so we want to make sure if there are tax cuts, they're done to help the middle class families most. But we also believe that if we're going to grow our workforce, if we're going to build this state and help it grow, because Atlas Van Lines does a study every year of which states have the most people moving out of them, and Iowa's number 7. And those are people who can afford to move out with a van, right? So imagine how many others are leaving that we don't even know about. And so as we look at this, we cannot look at this with one fix. Tax cuts cannot be the only thing we look at when it comes to building our state and growing our workforce. We have to look at quality education. We have to look at placemaking. We have to ensure that we have clean water. We have to make sure that people have a home. We have a 25,000 unit housing shortage in this state by 2030. 2030 is not that far away. And we are doing nothing to address housing in this state. So we want to be pushing that. So we're talking about a lot of things that lower costs for Iowa families. That's why I get a little frustrated, well, pretty frustrated when I see things like Senator Busolo presenting a proposal to take counties from Minnesota. It's offensive, frankly. And there are people who don't know how to pay their childcare bill next week. And the governor's talked a lot about childcare slots, but nothing about childcare costs. And so I don't know about you, but childcare, if you know anybody who's paying childcare, $1,700 a month. And that hasn't gone down. And so if we're going to truly address childcare, we have to address cost. And so we're looking at ways to do that. And then, of course, we also, as a caucus, continue to push forward legalization of marijuana for recreational use and enhancement of our medical cannabis programs. So those are sort of the priorities that we're bringing forward. But our job is to divide and to, frankly, create chaos. If we can create chaos in their large majority, we can start to slow some things down. And we can stop some things. Last year, in our small minority, we were able to stop a bill that would have banned IVF. And we did it by drawing attention on the floor to what it did, what a bill would do, and the impact, and getting texts from Republican legislators saying, is that really what this would do? During debate. And so we stopped it. And so we raised awareness. They were able to stop it in the Senate. And that's what we can do. So when it feels hopeless, the most common phrase I hear, and then I'll pass it over to Leader Weiner, the most common phrase I hear is, how do you do it every day? Yep. And so the joke is, it's an honor, not a pleasure. And because I used to say my pleasure, right? It is not a pleasure at all. But look, I mean, election night was pretty rough. It's been a pretty rough few weeks since election night. And the text that I get from people who say, it means so much to me that we've got people up there fighting for us. Please continue. This is a long game too, right? We might lose a battle, but we can win the war to make Iowa a better, more welcoming community if we just keep fighting. So we have hope. We believe it, but we're going to need you with us. We're going to need your voices. And so, yeah, that's where we are. There's my 10 minutes. Leader Weiner, take it over.
Thank you, Leader Konfrst. Thank you all for having me today. As you heard, this is my first time. It is actually not my church, but I really feel welcome. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for having me. As you said, there are wars and there are battles. And we have one battle right now over in the Clinton area that we can win. There is a special election in Senate District 35 because Chris Kenoria was appointed lieutenant governor. It's on the 28th, so people will have already had a full week of the former guy as president again to decide how to decide to get out and vote. So afterwards, if anybody wants to help in any way, making calls, whatever, please let me know. We'll be happy to loop you in. Because it's my first time and I sort of script myself more than Leader Konfrst does. Unfortunately, I came up with a whole different approach. So I'm not going to say the same thing.
Amazing.
As my background, some of you may know, my background is in the U.S. Foreign Service. I was a diplomat for 26 years. I bring this really weird skill set that I never thought would be useful to the job, which is lived and worked in autocratic societies. So as I was driving in today, I was listening to Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen and remembering, which was not supposed to be a positive song, but it was sort of taken as an anthem, and remembering that way back before the Berlin Wall fell, Bruce Springsteen came to East Berlin. It was about a little over a year before the wall fell. I was a brand new baby diplomat. We went out, they did his concert at a racetrack outside of East Berlin. 60,000 East Germans showed up from all over the country. 60,000. And when you think of what we're walking into and what they were living at that time, when it was his Tunnel of Love tour, he pulled someone up on stage. It was just a great concert. But when he sang Born in the USA, these East Germans from all over the country pulled out homemade US flags. And it still makes chills go up and down my spine to think that they not only did that, they traveled with it and they made that small gesture of defiance in the face of a government they didn't at that point know was doomed in about another year. So little gestures help, and that's sort of what I'm going to talk about a little bit. Jennifer's talked about, Leader Konfrst talked about the legislature. We're walking into, this is an interesting time to be doing this because we're really walking into uncharted territory at noon Eastern time next Monday. And I have no idea what it's going to be like at 12:01, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty different. And I'm pretty sure that despite us having lived through Trump 1.0, we're not really sure what Trump 2.0 is going to be like. So here in Iowa, we've already, I think, lived through some of the things that the federal government might be facing, sort of our own Project 2025, reorganizing, i.e. making much less transparent state government, cutting out boards and commissions, in other words, silencing Iowans' voices all over the state. So there's really not much transparency into state government anymore. I think they are likely to essentially, under the guise of property tax reform and local government bills, try and do something of the same for local government this year because it's what's left and because they think they have the votes. But I actually have news for them. There are city councilors and county supervisors all over the state who are, and as well as school board members who are facing really tough budgets this spring and who are going to come up here because they're not going to have it. So we'll see what happens. We will be there to support them. We'll be there to work with them. I actually, as Connie mentioned, that I come from Iowa City, so I feel like our city has one of the biggest targets on its back, as does our university, as the newly formed higher ed committee in the House sort of aims at doing whatever they're going to do to the Regents universities, in particular the University of Iowa, which frankly, if we want to grow this state and keep our young people here and bring in more people and recruit and retain workers is not a great idea. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about both ways that we've been here before as a country and some ways that brave people have viewed this sort of thing before. And I think we should heed President Biden's warnings that he issued on Wednesday evening in his farewell speech. We've been here before in some ways. The McCarthy era was filled with literal witch hunts and blacklists and loyalty oaths. We're seeing the wealthy bend the knee to the incoming president, and we're seeing many, though not all, in legacy media do the same. I say keep an eye on longtime civil servants and what happens, and ask anyone who was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, because some of them are still around. So my parents moved to Iowa during the McCarthy era. They possessed at the time some books and records that were sort of on the banned list. And so they were super careful and didn't unpack everything until they knew just who they were going to be dealing with. My mother's maiden name was Rosenberg, might ring a bell. So my uncle changed it to Rhodes so he could actually get jobs as a civil engineer.
Wow.
So we haven't seen the witch hunts yet. I expect they're coming, and I expect we are not ready for what's coming. So I think that one of the essential elements that any society faces when we're going down this road is trust. Who can you trust? Do you know who you can trust? In East Germany, where there were very few telephones and those that existed were tapped mostly, you knew who you could trust by whose door you could knock on at 9 o'clock at night when it was pitch dark out and they would open it for you. In a society with blacklists and in East Germany's case, the secret police, the Stasi, trust is a tenuous thing and we're all gonna have to really work at it. After the wall fell in Berlin, as the GDR's only free elections were approaching, I drove up to talk to people in Schwerin, and I will never forget sitting in the living room of the Bishop of Schwerin. They have the evangelical church, which is basically the Protestant church there, sitting in his living room and having him sit in his rocking chair and tell me, yeah, you know, the people here don't understand what's coming because they're going to open the Stasi archives and they're going to find out who in your family or who in your group was informing on whom, and it's going to be really tough. And he was right. They opened the Stasi archives. There were husbands who were informing on wives. There were people in organizations who were trusted, who were informing on their fellow members. I, as a baby Foreign Service officer, I was the person who was assigned to follow the environmental movement there, which was considered to be dissident. The government didn't want to hear anything about dirty water or clean or dirty air or chemicals that had leached into the ground in the Leipzig area. They operated in large part under the protection of the evangelical church there. And once the Stasi archives came out, it turned out that yes, there had been a couple of spies in their midst as well, and it destroyed some lives. But it was also a lesson in protection that I think we can all take. Those in the movement who had contact with me, a U.S. diplomat, had to decide whether or not they wanted to have contact with a U.S. diplomat. And it turned out in the end that it wasn't a bad thing. It sort of protected them from excesses. So I would argue that us being out there, helping people, being there if we see things happening, not standing down can really have an impact. I served in Turkey, 2 tours, got to know some really brave human rights lawyers during the worst time of the PKK insurgency. They risked their lives every day just doing their job. I think that a lot of us, not everyone, but a lot of us are going to be able to be brave without actually having to risk our lives. I once visited a home in Jizre, which is right down on the southern border, that was pockmarked with bullet holes. They'd had to board up windows because bullets had come all the way through the house to smash their credenza. And it was just then, again, safe for them to start opening up doors and windows. The Turkish state built a case against basically all the Kurds. They claimed they wanted to destroy the unity of the state. They controlled the media, and people bought it. So my question to all of you is, what case is the incoming administration making? What case has it made? And who's buying it and why, and what can we do about it? I don't know if you all have read On Tyranny by Professor Timothy Snyder. If you haven't, I really commend this thin volume to you. He admonishes us to not obey in advance, to defend institutions, and that's really a lot of what Leader Konfrst and I are doing. Can we pass our own legislation? No, but we can hold the Republicans accountable. They've been in power for 8 years. If something's not working, it's on them. That's right. And that's really what the legislature is all about. He says, also beware the one-party state, because it can really become corrupt, and that's something else that we're trying to hold them accountable on. Stand out, believe in truth, contribute to good causes, listen for dangerous words, and I believe we heard some from Senator Buslow the other day. Be as courageous as you can. I also commend to you Ann Applebaum's most recent book, Autocracy, Inc., those who want to run if you haven't read it yet. It's also very worthwhile and I think very apropos to this moment. We can all arm ourselves with knowledge. So what we're looking at, there are going to be a lot of people who just are here because they want to work hard and earn a living for their families, and they are being used and they may be targeted, and I'm talking about immigrants among others. There have been plenty of chances to fix our broken immigration system at the federal level. They've all been squandered or torpedoed by those who don't really want a solution, who just want scapegoats. So people won't notice that we're being fleeced by the wealthy and the oligarchs, not actually by the immigrants who work in the meatpacking plant. And at the federal level, and perhaps here at the state level, we will be fleeced by more tax breaks for the wealthy. And I have to say, carcinogens in water may flow downstream, but there's no such thing as trickle-down economics. So, in her condition of I'm almost done, don't worry. In her condition of the judiciary speech, Chief Justice Susie Christensen referred to the talking wall, where incarcerated young people had answered questions by putting up sticky notes. It was really powerful, the challenges these young people face and their answers to the questions. Well, if they have the talking wall, we need to create our own edifice of truth, trust, strength, courage, integrity. I challenge us all to consider what keeps us up at night and what gets us up in the morning, what we are willing to stand up and defend. We need to use the media tools available to us in ways perhaps that we hadn't. What's our catchphrase? As I said before, in Iowans, the Republicans have been in charge for 8 years now. If it's not working, it's broken, it's on them. Let's be the truth tellers. Yes, I'm worried about all the things we're going to have to see in the legislature this year. Our tax revenues, our public schools, our cancer rates, the opioid deaths, the shortage of affordable housing and childcare, water quality, but mostly I'm worried about people. I'm worried about our kids, our LGBTQA youth, immigrants, and I'm worried about our future. That's why we and all of you will be standing up. So thank you for everything you are doing and will do.
Connie, I was supposed to talk about the higher ed committee. I could just speak quickly to that. So in the House, the Speaker has created a new committee to look at higher education. The proposals that are out there are getting into Regents institutions, departments, and telling them what classes they can and cannot teach, what majors they can and cannot have. They're looking at taking the Iowa tuition grants, which sends people to private school like Drake, and making it only for people who do majors that will equal high-paying jobs in the state. So we don't know what's going to actually happen. We don't know if this committee is going to be a showcase for the chair who the Speaker loves and give him a chance to beat up on the University of Iowa every day, or if it will pass real policy. So we're still waiting to see. I put myself on the committee because I'm glutton for punishment, and we needed somebody from the Regents, we needed somebody from community colleges, and somebody from the private colleges. So we are just keeping an eye on it. So Connie had asked me to bring that up, and then I just didn't, and that's my fault. So sorry about that, Connie. Okay.
You're supposed to do everything that I asked you to do.
That's right. Awesome, Connie.
As I said earlier, if you'll raise your hand, I'll bring the microphone to you, and I will try and get the people in order. So
while she's walking, I'll say, someone said to me, do you think there'll be a lot of questions? I was like, have you ever been to one of these? There's never a shortage.
So my question is, do you answer emails from Republicans? I have lobbied for many, many years, and I used to get responses from Republicans, and I maybe get 5. Yeah. And so when did they decide they only represent their own like-minded folks?
2016-ish, probably. But yeah, during the AEA fight, as leader, I had 9,000 emails, all of them opposing the cuts, and most of them from out of district, and a lot of them from Republican representatives who hadn't responded. So we do respond. We believe we should respond to everybody, but I will tell you, they don't show up at forums. They don't answer emails. They don't come out and talk to constituents. And the answer I got from one of them was, we have had no electoral consequence for not doing so.
So let's give them a consequence.
Yeah,
Last
let's
night,
do
last
it.
night,
Yes.
last night, the opponent to our great candidate, Mike Zimmer, in Senate District 35, did not show up for the only forum in that district.
Yep.
Leader Konfrst,
Yes.
is this on?
Yeah.
Your initial comments about analyzing the results of
Yes.
the contest confounds me a little bit because I think that's pretty obvious what happened. We got killed. And it's interesting to me that instead of trying to use persuasion through abstractions like the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and things like that, that's not working. Mm-hmm. And as offensive as it may be to us, the Republicans' bluster seems to be working for them. Mm-hmm. And dovetailing on your Springsteen remarks, the question of your courage and your lack of outrage and being vocal and that kind of thing. We've had several even recent ones about Reynolds lowering raising the flag, and insulting our late president. We have Senate File 2412 that's going to indemnify Bayer Corporation and others on glyphosate poisoning. And them having the temerity to take out full-page ads specifically thanking the individual legislators involved that already support that legislation. Mm-hmm. And all of this, it seems like we're on defense or that we're waiting and we're not on offense. And I guess my question for both of you is that why aren't we meeting fire with fire and expressing more outrage verbally rather than trying to make nice and trying to, behind the scenes do bipartisan things when they are ignoring us?
Well, okay, I'm happy to answer a lot of that. So we don't actually know what happened at election night because we don't know who voted yet. So we are waiting we know the results, but I need to know, last time in 2022, I found out after we got the voter file that 92,577 Democrats stayed home. So our job then became target them for the next election. We don't know who voted yet because we haven't seen the voter file. I can't make wholesale changes based on assumptions or think pieces from national Democrats. I have to do it based on what happened in Iowa. And so I am waiting. We held 5 Trump seats. What went right in those communities? What was the voting breakdown? Was it women versus men, Republicans versus Democrats, no party voters? We don't have that yet. So I understand the frustration and the pressure to make decisions. And believe me, I hear it every day, but I cannot responsibly take the money that I ask from people and invest it in races until I know what happened specifically in Iowa, in the districts, at the precinct level in 2024. So that's the first thing. Secondarily, I think that there are 2 situations here. I have a responsibility to my constituents to get something done for them. And I can't do it without the other side. So sometimes I have to work with the other side. And I've been able to do that to serve my constituency. I will not take this job and make it a game. This is a responsibility I have to my constituents, so I will pass legislation if I can. Secondarily, I would argue that we fight back pretty hard, and there are a lot of measures put in place that make it hard for that to be seen. So we put forward legislation, we're aggressive, we do press conferences, everyone says I didn't hear about it, it's on all 3 channels, it's a frustrating media environment to try to break into right now, but we do that and then it doesn't go anywhere. So we point it out, but it is a very hard media environment to communicate in right now. And I think it is not true that we are not fighting anything with fire. We are fighting some things with fire. We are also trying to get something done and listen to Iowans and hear what they're telling us and respond in a way that they listen. Like we talk about putting people over politics because 85% of Iowans are sick of politics. So if we can blame Republicans for playing politics, instead of saying Republicans are bad, we might be able to get some of them to come to our side. So we're working at that game too. But I don't know what you...
I mean, I would say with respect to fighting fire with fire, that at least I haven't been leader very long, but I've been talking and pushing on at least 3 issues since I've been in the legislature. One is cancer, and the absolute need to combat we are one of the only 2 states with a rising cancer rate, and it is not okay. And one of the ways we do that is by working with a consortium of researchers, physicians, both at the University of Iowa and elsewhere, as well as victims of cancer, people whose kids are victims of cancer. And how we finally got at least a crumb, it's not very much, it's a start, it's not a lot, into the governor's speech about cancer this time was getting some of those folks into her office to talk to her aides so that they could get that into her speech. But I'm not going to stop talking about cancer, and I'm not going to stop talking about how we need to do the research wherever it leads. You referenced the Bayer bill, the one about the glyphosate and Roundup. It's coming back. We took them on full scale on the floor last year. We're continuing to take them on because it is part of the whole. Do we want a healthy state, or do we want a polluted state with that basically uses nitrates and glyphosate and whatever else to try and increase the yields, but making the people sick? And that's linked into clean water, which I've been told that nobody wants to hear about, but I've been talking about now since before I got into the legislature. And the other issue that I've been pounding in op-eds and wherever anybody will listen is getting the opioid settlement funds out the door so that we can actually save some lives. We're looking for different ways to do it. I welcome any ideas. I'd like to, for example, start comparing, and you do a really good job with certain numbers, Jennifer. I'd really like to start comparing some of the numbers that are going to vouchers, which I view as largely as tax breaks for the wealthy, as well as the people in county, most people who can already afford them, and compare that number to what it would cost to give kids free school lunch, for which I just filed a bill again yesterday. So that's not something else that I've been talking about essentially nonstop since so Jennifer's right too, that the media environment's tough. Somebody asked me, why should they contribute when we lose seats? I said, well, if you don't want to do that, go buy an AM radio station so that we can start to have different messaging out in the areas where a lot of the small town papers have died or been reduced to just maybe a page a week. And nobody's really getting decent information. And let's figure out, let's get ourselves on talk radio in that way. So,
I need to interrupt just a moment. If you drive a Buick, a silver Buick, with the license plate IXB785, you're blocking in somebody who needs to leave. So if you are here and you drive a silver Buick Verano, if you'll go that way and move your car. Thanks.
I would just add too that the most dangerous place in Des Moines is between me and a TV camera. If you see, I know myself. And so, we do the best we can. I will tell you that we just had a press conference that Leader Weiner and I participated in that the Capitol Hill Press Association has put on for 35 years. If anybody in this room knows my dad, who used to work for the Associated Press, they started it back in the day, and it's always been a bipartisan effort. And this year, Republicans didn't show again, and they didn't want to have it. And we said, no, it's not our fault that they're not showing. We will take and get the press from it. So, we do weekly press conferences. They don't. We're doing the best we can to get our word out. But it's a tough world out there right now because of the bifurcated media environment. People are tuning out. And therefore, they hear, I'll fix it, and that's just what they want to hear. And that's where we are. So
I'm going to move on to the next question.
I apologize because I don't read the bills that are introduced daily, but Senator Busolo wants to grow the state. Is this now the time in which the Democrats can introduce and really move through universal paid medical leave? Because that seems to me that would be a huge benefit as a pro-life message, but paid maternity care, sick children, school-age children. That seems to me like everyone should support universal paid medical leave.
they sure should.
they should. So we're about to start talking about family leave. Because the governor is introducing a bill that would offer some narrow segment. I haven't read the bill yet, I have to admit. I think it's largely focused on state employees, some form of family leave. So our message is going to be, what's good enough for state employees is good enough for all Iowa employees. Here's our bill to provide paid family leave for all.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we can certainly put those things forward. It is, again, if it was going to pass, it would have to be a Republican bill. Last year, when we've always for years had extending Medicaid postpartum coverage to 12 months in both chambers. Democrats have been proposing this forever. We heard they wanted to do this. We offered our bill to them. They said, no, thank you, because they also wanted to kick some people off Medicaid in the same bill. So this is sort of the way they get things passed, is by compromising good and bad within their own caucus. So
Our next question.
Actually, I have a couple. What state agency, what state agency could I call and find out about the school vouchers? What private schools got the money and how much money did it take away from the public schools? I mean, how would I find that out if I just made a phone call myself and wanted to know, and without being transferred 15,000 times?
unfortunately, that does not exist. It would be the Department of Education. We cannot get that data. The auditor's office has tried to get that data. We can't get the data. It is your tax dollars, and that data is impossible to, or very, very difficult to get, and especially laid out just like that. It's not compared that way.
I have a question from online. Has legislation been introduced to make private school and charter schools adopt the same regulations and standards that public schools must follow?
Yep, we introduced that last year, and during the voucher debate, we put it as an amendment. If they have to accept kids, I represent Dowling Catholic, and I was walking around with President Ryan once, and he said, is there ever an instance in which you would support public money to private schools? And I said, well, that's when public schools are fully funded. Let's talk about it, but only if they have to accept everyone, they have to welcome them all in, they have to follow the same rules and the same standards. So yeah, we've introduced that amendment. I'm sure you have too, on the other side. So yeah.
And it's one of our talking points right now. If you want to fund, if you want to use public dollars for public schools, for private or non-public schools, they have to play by the same rules. They need to be transparent. We need to be able to see where that money is going, because it's your tax dollars.
We have a question over here.
In the upcoming time to the election, I was all over the 3rd District, and I saw lots of anger about vouchers and about what happened to AEA. And my understanding was that it was bipartisan anger, yet it didn't change the votes. And I'm wondering, does that mean that education is an issue that doesn't drive voting, or why didn't it make the votes better?
We don't know yet. And we are doing post-election focus groups. We're looking at exit polling data. This election is confounding to some extent when it comes to what exactly happened. They still are in the same spot on those issues. They are still not popular. We need to start pointing out consequences, right? So this school just closed, let's say. How many schools have closed? How many average class size? We need to tie it as much as we can from the impact to the policy and who to blame. And that is what we're trying to do as often as we can. So, we're going to introduce legislation that says no kid can drive or be on a bus more than 45 minutes, on a bus on the way to school, so that we can point out then that kids are having to go a lot farther as schools close. Or legislation that says that if a school's in trouble, the state will come in and take money out of vouchers and put it toward that, right? Things that won't happen, but we just have to keep pounding this drum, and we have to keep tying the consequences in. I know it is frustrating. I don't know why. And we all would love to know.
One of the things I point out to folks is if you look south to Missouri voted very red.
Yep.
And because they have the ability to have citizen referendums, they enshrined abortion in their constitution separately. They raised the minimum wage, and they created paid family leave, all by citizen referendum, which we do not have in our toolkit.
But we did just introduce a bill in the House to have referendums.
Right. Well, we're doing the same thing in the Senate, but it tells me that we can figure out how to separate political parties from issues, there's a way to get it done, but so anybody who has that like magic key, please let us know.
Governor Reynolds, I've read somewhere, is willing to spend or pull $600,000 out of the taxpayer relief fund to cover the current budget gap. We know we expect revenues, tax revenues, to be down in 2024 because of the rates that have changed. And it'll be even worse this year, 2025, because they now have us on a 3.8% flat tax. That flat tax means that people on the some people on the upper end are going to have their state taxes cut in half. And I believe there are people on the lower end who are actually going to see increases in their state taxes because of that flat tax. So my question is, what do you think the Republicans plan to do when that taxpayer relief fund is finally depleted? And what's our fiscal future in this state?
Yeah, I mean, it's, Speaker Grassley's response has always been that we expected a little dip in revenue the first year after the plan, but don't worry, it'll all get better. The analogy I like to give is after the election, I was a little depressed. And so I was ordering a lot of DoorDash and it was getting to the point where we were going to have to dip into the taxpayer trust fund of the Konfrst household because we were spending so much. And then what I stopped doing was stop buying DoorDash rather than just go to savings and drain it down. So it's very much like what we're doing in the state. Those of you who were legislators in here before, Bryce, Joe, others, remember when we weren't ever going to use one-time money for ongoing expenses? I don't hear that anymore. But it is concerning. There are 500,000 Iowans who will get no benefit from that tax cut, and the average benefit for the lowest earners who will is $5. The average benefit for the highest is $23,000. And so, and they want to do more. You'll notice they're not talking about getting rid of the income tax anymore, because that is not ideal right now. But it is scary, and it is going to get worse, and it is very hard to talk about tax policy and the flat tax with Iowans who don't really want to talk about it. Property taxes are easier to talk about because a lot of them pay it, so that's why they're focused on that right now. But our point always with property taxes is we don't want to move things around. So if you got rid of the income tax, Dave Jacoby always says sales tax would be 16% or something to that effect. So, we don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. We want the final nut to be lower for people. And we feel like corporations and the richest Iowans have probably seen their fair share. So it's time for that middle. But that's not feeling likely. And so far what they're doing is ignoring the REC, the Revenue Estimating Conference. So far that is their plan, is ignoring it. So it's not great. Sorry. Would love to give you good news, but I don't have it.
Senator Herman Kornbach is also here in the audience today, and he has all the figures, if you need them, for how much of the funds that have been hoarded away in Des Moines really should have been allocated to public schools in order to keep them even with inflation. Yep. It's a big chunk of it.
Yep.
Question over here.
Hi, I'm a freshman at Valley High School, and I was wondering, as a youth in school, what is the best way to convince other young people to get into lobbying and activism?
Sure. You want to go first?
It's the best way. Set an example with just talk to your peers. Set an example. Bring them to something. Figure out something that they really care about, and take them to an event. It's basically, it's a form of public service that you're doing, and they can do too if the other thing is that when my daughter would complain about something, it's like, okay, now you can go and do X, or you can go and do Y, or you can go, if you really, you can't depend on everybody else to fix it, but here's what you can do to make it better, because you are the future, and your voices, I believe, should be the most powerful of the Capitol.
Yeah, make it real for them, right? Government is why TikTok is banned. And forget what you think about it. That is a way to tie it for them to the government passed a bill The Supreme Court didn't intervene, and TikTok is banned. Again, good, bad, or otherwise, it's a way to show them the impact of what government is doing that impacts their daily lives. Because right now, property tax policy probably isn't the most interesting thing to you, nor is like the school funding formula. But the art program gets canceled. This is because the legislature didn't give us enough money. Help draw the tie and help them see the impact of the work we do every day. Because I think then you can demonstrate, I think, together your collective voice in a way that might have some more relevance that could be helpful.
Senator, you referred to Iowa being one of 2 states with rising cancer. Who do we get this honor with?
I'm actually not, we're the only one, perhaps we're the only one with a rising rate, but one of the 2 highest cancer rates in the country.
Okay.
But I couldn't tell you right now who the other one,
Okay. And then Representative, where are these numbers that you need to decide what to do? Where are they coming from or not coming from?
Oh, you mean for election stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all looking at it. So the voter file, I don't know, most folks don't know this. A lot of folks said who voted the day after election day. They don't know. And so the voter file has to be run through the Secretary of State, make sure it's accurate information. We get that soon. And that is the actual precinct breakdown of who voted and why, and where, right? So that's how in 2022, we were able to figure out, 92,000 Democrats stayed home. We can identify them. We can work on getting them re-registered to vote. We can do that kind of stuff. So that is coming from the Secretary of State's office. That's data that we're all going to look at together. We're also doing collectively as Democrats some focus groups and some research in the state to figure out issues and connecting them together. So that's money that we have taken to invest in learning the information, because they have unlimited piles of money and they don't rely on facts, and we don't and do. And so we have to make sure that we are making the smartest decisions. And it gets really hard because everyone wants answers immediately. And so what happens is this void gets filled with what happened. And it probably is. I mean, we know the result, but I mean, until I can know, you know what, everybody hated vouchers, it didn't work. Okay, now we won't talk about vouchers next time. Or Democrats stayed home because they weren't excited about the top of the ticket. Okay, let's drive up Democratic turnout in Democratic areas, right? We have to know that stuff before we can invest resources in addressing it. It's frustrating. I want to get going too. I've already got 3 candidates recruited. I can't tell them a lot about who voted last time because we don't know. And if I said, well, you got beat by Republicans, I'm just making it up. And I can't do that if we're going to actually try to win.
We have a question online.
Someone says she represents a community of Catholic women, religious nuns, who are very concerned about our immigrant neighbors. What immigration legislation do you think the Republicans might be planning to introduce?
Yeah, we have heard actually from the Catholic Conference a concern about this with regard to the harboring bill that was introduced last year, one that if you're harboring an undocumented immigrant in your car, you can be responsible. And that's scary for people who are just trying to get people food, things like that. It's got a real chilling effect. You know, my point continues to be to the speaker and others, well, you got what you wanted at the federal level, so figure it out, let him handle it. We shouldn't be handling immigration at the state level anyway. And as Leader Weiner said, there were lots of really good proposals out there. We were ready to go, and Donald Trump made them stop. So, but I don't know what they're going to put forward this time. They certainly ran on immigration, but there's not a lot at the state we can do. And what they tried last year is currently, of course, not happening because it was unconstitutional.
My guess is that we could see something, but I think we're unlikely to see very much because the administration is changing in Washington, and there will be plenty happening on that front starting next week.
Over here.
As we talk about the fiscal decisions of the Republicans, it feels like they're looking at maybe regionalization of perhaps high schools, perhaps cutting back on the number of county courthouses, just reducing the size of state government just by starving, counties and cities. What do you think the end game is of some of these fiscal decisions that the Republicans are making?
That's tricky.
That's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for you, but my colleagues and I keep being astounded by the fiscal moves they're making, vouchers included, that really hurt the rural areas. I believe, I haven't looked at the budget document in detail yet, but I believe the governor's budget zeroes out something referred to as the COGS, or the Councils of Government this year, which are various regional councils of government that have, the one that I've dealt with is ECOG, East Central Iowa Council of Governments, that allows different counties and cities to work together in actually a very effective way, and for mostly the smaller places to end up with services they wouldn't otherwise have. So maybe it's they can do it, that's not where they live, and they're not seeing any electoral consequences part yet. So it's up to us to get that message out, which is, we were talking about messaging somewhat earlier. There are no off years. We have to be active all over the state this year, particularly after the session is over. We have to be out listening to people, not just in our home communities or in the urban centers, but literally all over the state, so that we can hear what people's concerns are, and so that we can also try and give them some insight into what's happening, because I'm just not convinced that many of them are getting much in the way of accurate information.
And we hold town halls in red districts. I think Senator Cornbach and I were on a panel together down in Burlington at one point. So we go into districts that we want to flip, and when they're not holding forums, and then we'll hold one and try to address what's happening. We're trying to get that message out there. But what is their end game? Power. Power.
We have a question over here.
My comment will be very short. Plymouth is my home church. This is my neighborhood, and we're here because of Interfaith Alliance. In our local grocery store, we have the Christian Resource Guide, and on the front, a picture of the state capitol. I was shocked.
On the first day of session, so you need to know that the group that has the most lobbyists at the Capitol is the Family Leader. They have eight, and they had a church service, a Christian church service on the first day of session with a praise band and all of that. Was relatively disturbing to walk through in a state building. It just felt quite out of place, if I could say.
Okay. A lot of the things that we've been talking about and legislation that the Republicans have foisted on us kind of has more of an impact on the rural communities. Do you see a tipping point where some of those rural Republican legislators are finally going to, not be worried about getting primaried?
Yeah, well, that's the issue, right? Is that we had some really good ones in the House that opposed school vouchers and were standing strong because of their rural communities. 6 of them got primaried by the governor's supported folks. That has really caused a chilling effect. I hear Republicans on the floor saying, I don't want a primary, I don't like this bill. I watch them get called down to the governor's office. They come back up, they say they're going to vote for it. And so that has really had a chilling effect. 53% of Iowans now live in 10 counties since the last census, and that's only going to grow. And so that by definition, Polk, Dallas, Johnson, Lynn will have more state representatives after the next redistricting in 2032. So the tipping point, I think, continues to be us having to draw the connection for them. And when their local school closes, we go there and we say, this is because of this. And if you don't like it, it's because of this legislator. And it's going to take that kind of granular targeting, I think.
We are out of time. Help me to thank both Leader Weiner and Leader Konfrst. And I evidently have some reading to do from the Christian Resource Guide. So thank you all. Thank you to both of you for being here and for all of your work at the State House and across the state. Thank you, everyone here. Join us again, if you will. Crossroads is always the third Friday of the month, and I hope you will join us in February. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
Oh, thank you.